Hello everyone, Luciano Oliveira, Oliveira Lawyers. Today is October the 1st, 12:30 Rio de Janeiro time. We are starting one more live stream. Remember that if you are here with us, you have a priority to suggest topics of your interest to be discussed. And let's take a look. All right, I see general principle. We have a participation already. Boa tarde, Luciano. Do you foresee the U.S. federal government shutdown affecting background checks and apostilles for those pursuing visas in Brazil and Portugal? All right, that's a great point. Very up-to-date subject, right? General principle. And yes, typically, right, like the background check and apostille services, they are not considered essential, right? Like they are kind of secondary to other more, I would say, critical services provided by the federal government. So yes, it could affect. I don't know if it's going to affect like immediately, like as of today or tomorrow, if they're going to basically just close the window and tell people to come back later. But yes, I think that's possible. Now, based on history, we just hope the shutdown is not going to last for long. But yes, that's a good point. Another nuance here, general principle, is that the apostilles, they are provided both at the federal and state level. So typically, when you have, for instance, a birth certificate that was issued in New York State, the state is going to legalize, is going to provide the apostille for such birth certificate. So you're not going to need the federal government for this particular type of apostille. And just talking about New York, for New York State, two of the main locations for you to get an apostille at. It's going to be one in the financial district in New York City, and the second one naturally is going to be in Albany. All right, but so for birth certificates, you don't need the federal government. Also, if you're going to apply for a more entry-level type of visa in Brazil, for instance, the digital nomad traditionally, background checks from the municipal level, county level, or state level, they are going to be enough, right? So even on the background check front, like you could eventually, have a workaround. Okay, now if you are applying for residency in Brazil based on marriage, or if you are applying for any Portuguese visa, then in this case, you're going to need the FBI background check, which naturally is going to require work to be done by the federal government. And once the FBI background check is issued, the correct route for the apostille is going to be through Washington, D.C. All right? Very interesting topic. All right, Matt Gaines, good to see you. Oi, Dr. Oliveira, can you discuss property tax, homeowner in Brazil? Absolutely, Matt. So, property tax in Brazil, we call it, like the main one is IPTU, Imposto Predial de Território Urbano, okay? And basically it means that you're going to pay taxes on your urban property, right? So taxes on urban property traditionally is going to be paid to the local government, all right, while properties in rural land are going to pay taxes to the federal government, right? So there is this division, urban to local and rural to federal government, okay? Taxes, they are typically payable in either a single installment, or you can also set up a payment plan, right? Typically, this payment plan is going to be like in 10 installments. You can pay, if you pay in a single payment, they're going to give you a break. They're going to give you like a discount for, to pay off this thing like, in a single shot, or you're going to pay at face value, divided in 10 different installments. We say carnet carnê do IPTU is like, a payment coupon. You have like, a separate sheet for each month that you're going to pay. You can also download this document from the, from the municipality website, or you can have it physically, right? Nowadays, most of those things, they are handled electronically via a web portal, all right? Now, Matt, I would assume you are thinking about, like cost components of property ownership. There may be other obligations, okay? So for a building, like if you have an apartment in Brazil, HOA fees are typically meaningful. They are typically higher than what you would expect. And part of the reason for the HOA fees being so expensive is because of safety reasons. And also, I would say, maybe, 40% safety reasons, 60% because of labor obligations that the homeowners association will have, right? Like, so if you have like 5 people or even just 3 people working in the building, right? Like you're gonna need to pay several benefits, and the Brazilian labor legislation is very archaic, right? Like and it does create a lot of burden to condominiums, all right? So this is gonna be passed along, and you're gonna end up paying a large bill no matter what, right? If you have a lean type of management, like the HOA fee is going to be there, is going to look, higher than what it should be, but it's not going to be as high as what you would see for, like a large building with, many employees. All right, so HOA fees is another cost component. There may be other fees. One very typical fee for beachfront properties is going to be laudemius, right? Laudemius is a weird name. If I'm not mistaken, it comes like from a Roman law or Roman, I don't know, history or society, as you will. And it works like this, right? Like, if the federal government or state government or even a religious institution, if they let you build something on their land, they are going to be entitled to a fee to be paid, by everyone who's living on the land, right? So it's a kind of, not so common type of arrangement, but particularly if you are in beachfront areas, right? Like in the coastal area of Brazil, I would say is more common than it would be elsewhere, right? And when you have this kind of arrangement, the laudemius, then you also need to pay an additional fee to either the federal government, or it could be to a religious institution, or whoever owns the right on the land, right? So you own the property, but you have a kind of, eternal landlord that you're going to be paying in addition to the property taxes. All right, Matt. So that was just an intro for you. And Adrian, let me know if you have specific questions about any of those things. Marisa Navas, boa tarde, Dr. Luciano. Estamos na expectativa da sua live. All right, you guys, so welcome. Good to see you over here. Marisa, Ricardo, thank you for all your support in Portugal. Thank you so much. And let's see, it looks like that's it for now. Maybe we could take a look at the news. Let's see what's going on. All right. Okay, so let's see. The main headline here is talking about tax returns, and there is like a bill being discussed at the Brazilian Congress, and it's actually a project from President Lula to exclude part of the taxpayers from taxation, okay? And I think the proposal makes a lot of sense. And believe it or not, like the exclusion is going to be for people making up to 5,000 reais per month, right? So nowadays, 5,000 reais per month means less than $1,000 per month, meaning that whoever is getting this exemption, right? Like it's gonna be under $12,000 a year, and if you are under this bracket, then you pay no income tax whatsoever. And I fully agree with the proposal, right? Now the problem, and I can explain to you the problem. It makes like it looks like common sense to approve a proposal like that, but the real problem is that in Brazil, because of how our constitution is structured, whenever you get a benefit, let's say, judges, whenever they get something, whenever, like the Congress people, they get something, you can never take that thing away, right? It means like, the Constitution kind of drives this type of understanding that whenever, benefits are provided, they cannot be taken away. So nowadays, you have a like unbelievable level of payments to people from the judiciary power, right? Like, judges, they make an unbelievable amount of money, right? I think it's obscene, particularly when you consider that, the minimum wage in Brazil is like, 1,600 reais, right? Around 1,600 reais, meaning, like about $300 a month. And, judges, many times they make more than 100,000 reais per month, right? And 100,000 reais, we're talking about, like around, I don't know, $20,000, $18,000, right? So think about two persons here, right? Like one, it's going to be a minimum wage employer making 300, and then you have a judge over here making 20,000, right? Like, I mean, how can you conciliate those two things? So when we talk about minimum wage and we talk about those types of waivers, they actually impact on this whole scheme that is interconnected, right? So that's the concern that is being discussed over here, and it's saying, you know what, like this change in tax return is going to impact on a 10 billion reais loss in terms of taxation per year. Now, my final take on it is that the problem is not like the exemption, right? The problem is not the waiver. The problem is everything else, like I just said. You cannot have people making $300 on one side and someone else making $20,000 and paid by the government, right? Like, I mean, if that was paid by a company, I understand. If a company wants to pay someone $100,000 a month, that's absolutely fine. But the government cannot pay one person $300 and another person $20,000, particularly because these are just like regular judges. And we have dozens or actually hundreds of thousands of judges making a huge amount of money. Okay, so there you go. That's the main headline that we see today. Another headline is talking about University of São Paulo. University of São Paulo is leaving the number one position in the ranking of the best universities in South America, right? Which, by the way, is not like that meaningful, right? Like University of São Paulo is typically well ranked against universities from all over the world. So, it's sad to see that now, even when competing, to other universities in South America, University of São Paulo is losing like the number one spot. That's a pretty good university. That's where I went twice, right? My first course at the University of São Paulo, it was actually engineering. I didn't finish the program. It wasn't what I expected. And then later I went to law school also at University of São Paulo. And yes, it's a pretty good university. One problem we have in Brazil, which you may not be familiar with, is like how universities or how college students, they get access to such universities, right? So in the United States, typically the most desirable universities are going to be private ones, and the state-supported ones are going to be less desirable, right? Like, I'm not saying they're not good. I'm just saying that they are less desirable in general, right? Like, if people would have the funds and an option to pick, typically they're going to go after a private college in the United States. Now, in Brazil, it's exactly the opposite. The best universities, by far, they are the universities funded by either the state, right? University of São Paulo is actually funded, if I'm not mistaken, by the city, but you also have many universities funded by the state. In Brazil, everybody wants to get into a, public university. That's how we call it. USP, University of São Paulo, is a typical state-funded or public university, and it's regarded as the best college/university in Brazil. Now, the weird thing is, like, whenever you see the type of students that have access to the public universities, they are going to be invariably students coming from at least like middle class, right? So typically students who would not have money to pay for a private university, typically they are not going to have access to those universities because, like, there are the prep courses for you to get into a competitive university. And the prep courses, the best prep courses, they are very expensive. The same thing for high school, right? So whenever you see people in University of São Paulo, they're not paying a dime, right? Everything is funded by the state. But for them to get into University of São Paulo, they typically spend a lot of money during their high school years, and also to pay for a prep course, right? So it's a kind of perverse dynamic here, because you are kind of creating a barrier for students who lack the means to have access to the university that's not going to cost anything. And those who have money to pay for university, guess what? They are going to get free education, right? And that's very typical of Brazil, and very difficult to change, because whenever you think about, the lawmakers, they are actually the ones who went to public school, right? And now they have like children who are on their way to attend public university, right? So this kind of perpetuates this kind of weird arrangement that we have in Brazil. But there you go. Those were our news. Let's take a look at our chat window. All right, General Principal, would you mind giving your opinion on living and investing in Niterói compared to Rio? General Principal, I think it's a great deal, right? I think it's an amazing deal. Niterói, is almost like the same thing as Rio de Janeiro. It's just separated by a long bridge, as you probably know. But in terms of natural beauty, Niterói also has, as much natural beauty as Rio de Janeiro, and it is, substantially more affordable than Rio de Janeiro, right? Because even though Niterói is a neighbor city, it's not Rio de Janeiro. So, price-wise, everything is going to cost less. Usually, you're not going to be as land locked as you are in Rio de Janeiro, like constrained, like kind of to the coastal areas, and then you have the hills. So Niterói, you have more access to different areas. I do like Niterói a lot, and there is a huge upside. That's something personal to me, is that it's going to get you easy access to the best beaches in Rio de Janeiro, in my opinion. Okay, and when you think about Búzios, right? Arraial de Búzios, that's my number one a beach in Rio de Janeiro. Is not super fancy, right? It's not like a secret spot. Is actually a let's say major tourist destination in Rio de Janeiro, right? I'm gonna write over here, Arraial dos Búzios, right? So it's a major tourist destination. It's not a hidden spot. It's not like the coolest place around. It's a place that I like a lot, okay? And whenever I leave Rio de Janeiro to go to Búzios, guess what? I need to cross the bridge from Rio de Janeiro to Niterói, right? And from there, I'm gonna drive to Búzios, and traffic in the south zone of Rio de Janeiro, it's always horrible, right? And I'm not just talking about like the rush hour. I'm talking about any time of the day, right? So any time of the day, I want to leave the south zone of Rio de Janeiro is going to be like a half an hour just to reach a major highway. And then if I'm going to Búzios, this is like an additional 30 minutes or 40 minutes to cross to Niterói, and then from Niterói, the trip gets easier on us. All right, but really interesting question, General Principal. All right, let me see if we have any other participation. Folks, don't be shy. We have several viewers. Let us know your topics of interest. That's what we are here for, to discuss topics that are of interest to you as our audience. And in the meantime, let's take a look at our Remax friends. Let's take a look at their ad. And here it is, right? They're based in Leblon, Rio de Janeiro, right? Like one of the most traditional and upscale neighborhoods in Rio de Janeiro. But they are also addressing or taking care of many of our clients throughout Brazil, all right? So if you are in need of a realtor, a real estate agency, take a screenshot. You can get in touch, no commitment. You just send an email, or there is a WhatsApp number in there. And there you go. You can get in touch and have a start point for your journey as a property owner in Brazil. All right, let's see if we have anything else. If not, we're gonna go to our backlog of topics. All right, this one is about Portugal. All right, for the D7 visa, can you please elaborate on what constitutes passive income? All right, so just as a context, right? Brazil has the Brazil retirement visa. Portugal has something else. Portugal doesn't have like a retirement visa per se, but Portugal has the so-called passive income, right? So I like the Portugal approach a lot because it doesn't require someone to be necessarily a retiree. The only requirement is that you have like secure, safe, consistent income, right? So that's the name. And many people, they call it by D7, right? D7, the passive income visa. Some people, they're going to call it D7 retirement visa from Portugal, but there is no such language of retirement, right? It just happens that a very good source of passive income is going to be retirement, okay? And the analysis, right, like addressing what constitutes, passive income for the purpose of the D7 visa, like there is no, specific or limited list on what is going to constitute, but the test that is typically applied by the Portuguese consulate when evaluating your income is going to be like this. Listen, if he doesn't do anything, if she doesn't do anything, like will this string of income last forever, right? That's the concept, right? And I can give you some examples of what is typically understood as a passive income and what it's not. So if you have a rental property, right, you have the deed, you can show the deed in your application, and you have a string of income coming from this property, Portuguese consulate is going to give you a thumbs up because you own the property, and guess what? For as long as you live, as long as you don't sell the property, you're going to be receiving a nice stream of income arising from the lease of your property, right? So thumbs up, that's very solid passive income. Now let's talk about one that is not as clear-cut. Let's say if you have like an ETF, right? Like you're investing, I don't know, with Vanguard, right? Like you have 50,000, you have 100,000, you have 500,000 US dollars invested with Vanguard. And Vanguard is paying you like every month, like you're getting some dividends, maybe your portfolio is increasing in value, right? So even though you have like a substantial amount of money, let's assume $500,000, this is not necessarily passive income, even though the dividends themselves, they could be, if you think about it, you don't know how this portfolio is going to behave over time. And it could be very well possible that there would be a crash, like your portfolio would be reduced to, I don't know, 100,000, and this 100,000 would be consumed by you in the next 10 or 20 years, right? So this is a typical case of income that is not recognized as passive. All right, now let's talk about something like in the middle, okay? In the middle. Something in the middle would be more like a 401k or a Roth IRA, right? So you have the funds over there, but now, you could maybe draw, maybe you're not drawing, maybe the pile of money that you have is going to allow you to draw this money for just 10 years instead of 20, right? So this is not as good as a pension or Social Security would be, but in my opinion, it's better than something like, like just regular funds would be. All right, so I hope that was helpful on the qualifying income for the D7 visa. Let's take a look. Matt Gaines, question from Adrian. He's asking about the highway systems in the South. How modern compared to the U.S. highway system? Matt, so typically, right, highways in the south of Brazil, if we're talking about Rio Grande do Sul and Santa Catarina, they are better than what you would see in Minas Gerais, right, which is kind of, middle west, south of Brazil, kind of in between. So they are better right now compared to the ones in the United States. I mean, it's difficult to beat the U.S., even though, right, like the U.S., it looks like is not a leader in infrastructure like it used to be in the past. Nowadays, you have China, you have other countries doing so well from an infrastructure property, which is very sad to say. But I think, the highway system in the United States, particularly the ones I'm familiar with, for instance, like in Texas, right? They are far ahead of those in Brazil. This said, the highway system, transportation system in the south of Brazil, it works pretty well. I don't think this is going to be a major problem for you guys. There are some really good airports, right? Particularly in Florianopolis. Like Florianopolis, there is the international airport. It's a beautiful airport with flights, going to pretty much any destination in Brazil. So yes, I think you guys are going to be good with your transportation in general. Ahmed, good to see you, Ahmed. Hello, Mr. Oliveira. What are the risks of closing the property sale before the beauty area is recorded on the title? All right, Ahmed, I'm glad you're asking, right? So there are two different scenarios, right, Ahmed? One scenario is like if you're just buying the property for the sake of buying. And another scenario is if you are buying the property for the purpose of the real estate investor visa. Okay, now if you're buying this property just for the sake of buying, meaning the ownership is the main is the main goal. The risks there are pretty low, okay? Because in theory, you buy this property and you could record the built area yourself. So, risk would be, I would say, minimal, right? I think it is a duty of the seller, because the seller is selling a property, you're paying good money. This is not your responsibility, right? So typically in our transactions, we're gonna have something like this, Ahmed. In the purchase agreement, you're gonna, give enough down payment so the seller can do the legwork to fix up the title, meaning record the construction on the title, right? And then, for the closing, the seller would have to provide you with the title updated with the built area, right? But again, I mean, depending on how you're negotiating, I've seen cases, right? Not typically here at the firm, because we don't like that much, but very common out there for people to say, listen, I don't care. I'm just going to buy as land. And actually, unfortunately, Ahmed, like some Brazilians, they are going to even like it, because if you don't have like the built area recorded on the title, guess what? You're going to be paying taxes on land only, right? And so, unfortunately, very typical of Brazil, right? Like people playing games, to avoid taxation. Not good, right? Now, let's address the other scenario. Let's assume, Ahmed, that you're buying the land for the purpose of investing in the real estate investor visa. In this case, I would be concerned, right? And I want to share with you guys, let me see if I can pull this up, Resolução Normativa 36, right? And yeah, so I'm going to show a document in Portuguese over here, Ahmed, but I think it's very important. So the real estate investor visa in Brazil is based on Normative Resolution number 36. That's the one I have here on my screen, right? And when you take a look at the qualifying properties, there are only two types. I'm going to read it to you, right? So the residency for a real estate investment is going to be available for the purchase of real estate in urban area, right? So that's the first requirement. And I'm translating for you as we go, like urban area, okay? In an amount at least of 1 million reais, right? And you probably know that outside of the, like for some specific areas in the country is going to be 30% less, like north or northeast. But most of the country, it got to be 1 million reais. And then they are going to give you two options. One option is going to be, like a real estate property that was built out, right? So it was built in the past. And the second one is going to be real estate that is being built. Right now, the second one being built is not like for private sellers. They're talking here about developments, right? When you have a developer, they're building, I don't know, like a couple of hundred apartments. That's letter B. Letter A, it says very clearly real estate that was built out. Okay. Now, the challenge here is that whenever you are applying for the real estate investor visa, you are presenting a bunch of documents, and one of the documents is going to be, like the property title. And if the property title says land, guess what? The immigration officer, they're going to say, this is not compliant, right? Like, I mean, this person is applying for this visa, but they are, showing they bought land instead of a property, okay? And so that's why here at the office, like we never recommend that people would buy, a property that has construction, but the title shows something else, because again, you don't want to risk your application for a real estate investor visa. All right. I hope that was helpful, Ahmed. Aaron, good to see you, Aaron. It has been a while. Oi, Luciano, bom dia. How do you feel about Búzios compared to Cabo Frio? in terms of living and investing? Aaron, that's an advanced level question. I'm glad you asked, right? So very different lifestyles, Aaron, like Búzios, a smaller city, right? Like Cabo Frio, larger, more cosmopolitan city. So it's more about the type of feeling and vibe that you are pursuing. Okay, so in terms of living, if you like something more laid back, more, something slow paced, I would recommend the Búzios. If you want something that resembles more like Rio de Janeiro or Niterói, then Cabo Frio is going to be your answer. Like they're going to have, better options in terms of restaurants, of infrastructure, and everything else. All right. Now, in terms of investing, Aaron, it's an interesting question. I don't know if I could make a distinction in terms of, Cabo Frio is better than Búzios and vice versa. I think, they are both interesting spots for investment. Like Búzios is like, a really, really special place from an experience perspective. And Cabo Frio, it's a great option, like for a urban lifestyle by the beach, right? So both of them could be good choices, Aaron, for investment. All right. Okay, it looks like that's it for now. Let me see if we have any other questions, or maybe we should tackle our backlog. All right, let's go to the backlog. And another one for Portugal. All right, I'm considering, picking a Portuguese visa. It could be either the D7 or the Golden Visa. Can you compare those two? All right, so yeah, that could be a long talk, to compare in details both routes. But I can tell you the core distinction, right? Like why people go after the Portuguese Golden Visa. The only reason, in my opinion, that someone would pursue the Golden Visa is if they don't want to actually live in Portugal, okay? Portugal is more demanding than Brazil in terms of giving you a visa, right? And getting you to live in Portugal. So in Brazil, many times people get like their retirement visa, they spend a month or a couple of months in Brazil, then they go back to the United States. Typically, Brazil is not going to chase you because of that, okay? Not Portugal. Portugal wants you to live at least 6 months a year in Portugal. And in addition to that, if I'm not mistaken, the number of months for each period of authorization for residency, you cannot exceed 8 months outside of Portugal, right? Like, so the 6 months per year is very generous in my opinion. But if you think about 8, in a 2-year period of time, it means like if you spend 6 months out of your first year abroad, for your second year, you're going to have only 2 months to be outside of Portugal, right? So you see, it's much more demanding. And that's where, the Golden Visa is going to shine, because the Golden Visa is the only exception to this rule in general in Portugal. So for instance, for the D7, which is the passive income visa, you need to follow those rules, like 6 months, no more than 6 months outside of Portugal during those first 2 years. And if you live like for 6 months in the first year, second year, you just have 2 months. Not the Golden Visa. The Golden Visa, the requirement is that you spend only 14 days, per year in Portugal, right? Sorry, I don't recall if it's 14 or 15, but the bottom line is this: like when you go with the Golden Visa, Portugal is basically saying, listen, you are investing a boatload of money here in the country. Guess what? We're not going to make you stick around because we want, like rich investors coming to our country. And if they don't stay here, who cares? Like they're bringing money, right? So that's more or less the distinction. And our recommendation usually goes like this: listen, you're not going to pursue the Portuguese Golden Visa unless you don't want to live in Portugal, right? Which is kind of weird. But it's exactly the purpose of the golden visa is like when you're trying to pursue, for instance, the Portuguese passport without actually living in Portugal, okay? But, many of our clients are going to say, no, but my purpose is exactly to live in Portugal, right? And then we're going to say, all right, so if you want to live in Portugal, D7, D8, there are a few other visas. They are going to be more meaningful to your journey. All right, let me see if we have anything else from our chat. Folks are kind of quiet today. Let me know if you have any topics of your interest. If not, I'm going to get something else from our backlog. All right, for the backlog, all right. I'm thinking about developing a pousada in Bahia. Do you think this is a good idea? And what's your thoughts on that, right? I think it's going to depend on your specifics, right? For any investment that you're going to make in Brazil, there are many, many aspects of your life that should be considered when answering if that's a good idea or not, right? Are you going to be in Brazil full time? If you're going to be in Brazil full time, kind of enjoying, right, the journey of building the pousada, it may make more sense. If you are a typical US citizen trying to develop this from abroad, chances of this business going sideways is very, very high. Okay, there is a cultural component in the Brazilian culture that says, listen, right, here comes a gringo full of money, and eventually, during this relationship, something could and typically goes wrong, right? And so I would say if you want to develop a pousada, and by the way, pousada, I think it could be translated as a lodging or an inn, right? INN. This could be like two translations. If you know a better translation for pousada, share here in the chat window so we can do this in a more interactive manner, right? But so the things I would recommend you to check is if you want to stay in Brazil for the long term, I would recommend you to invest money that's not the only money that you have. So if you have spare money, you want to invest in a pousada, that's all right. But if it is your retirement money, the only money that you've saved, don't do it. That would be my take on it. If you are doing that with a Brazilian partner, right, also try to assess, the principles behind this partnership. Is it like a romantic relationship? Or is it a friendship? Or is it just like a pure business endeavor? Okay, so these are some takes naturally, right? It's from our backlog, so I don't have a feedback right now to further expand. But typically, it's more like a lifestyle type of investment, right? It's not an investment that people are going to be doing for returns only. If you're concerned about returns, if you want to, have a safe return, probably there are better ways of making money than investing in a beachfront lodging in Brazil, in my opinion. All right, but if it is a lifestyle type of choice, you want to be there, you want to go through the process of creating something beautiful by the beach, by all means, go for it. All right, okay, all right. Let me see if we have something else. All right, no further participations. If you guys are around, give me a ping just so I know our chat window is working as it should. All right, let me see what else from our backlog. All right, I was born in the US to a Brazilian mother. Now I'm trying to renew my passport as an adult, and I'm having a really hard time. Can you assist with that? All right. Test chat. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Adrian. All right. So going back to this question, right? Like you were born in the United States to a Brazilian mother or a Brazilian father, you typically have access to the Brazilian citizenship. Now, what you need to renew your passport is going to depend on what you recorded in the past. Nowadays, there is a mandate from the Brazilian federal government to all the consulates across the world, to all the Brazilian consulates across the world. And it goes like that. Listen, for you to give passports now to Brazilians, like you're going to make sure that they have their civil life fully recorded in Brazil. Okay? And the idea here is that if you married abroad, like meaning you are Brazilian, for instance, living in the United States, you married it could be either to a Brazilian or to a U.S. citizen in the U.S., this marriage needs to be recorded in Brazil, right? It's not enough that you marry in the United States. You need to get this marriage certificate and record in a Brazilian cartório, okay? And it goes beyond that. Like if you divorce, guess what? The divorce needs to be homologated, right? Like actually divorce is a little bit more, could be a little bit more complex because if there are, either children or assets involved, then you cannot just register this divorce in Brazil. You need to homologate the divorce, and homologation is done at the STJ, which is the second highest court in Brazil, and this could take a while. Okay, so we just spoke about marriage and divorce, and on top of that, you need to have your CPF, which is your Brazilian tax ID, up to date. Meaning that if you haven't been using for several years, potentially it is in a suspended mode, right? It's not canceled. Like CPFs, they don't get usually canceled like this. So you would be in a suspended, dormant mode, and you need to do some filings to bring the CPF back, to active status. You also need the voting card, the Brazilian voting card. So let's say if you got the Brazilian passport when you were a kid and now you are an adult, guess what? You must have the Brazilian voting card. In Brazil, voting is mandatory. It's not like in the United States that you decide if you want to vote or not. In Brazil, by law, you must vote. Okay, so if you are living in the U.S., and you're not voting, guess what? You are out of compliance. So you also need to pay some fines. The fines are not really meaningful. They are more like a symbolic value. But you need to have the voting card. You need to pay some fines. And then you are compliant on that front as well. And if you are, male, then you also need to enroll with military service, right? Like it doesn't mean that you're actually gonna, go to the army and do training and stuff. It just means you need your reserve card, meaning that you are in the military reserve. And if Brazil needs you, guess what? They're gonna call you, right? So there are many, many things that people in your situation could need. My suggestion is for you to, gather your documents, schedule a consultation. We can go over your specifics and then envision a pathway for you to regularize your situation and then secure a new Brazilian passport. All right? All right. General principle. I read that there is a project to connect São Paulo to Campinas via rail. Are you familiar with the Campinas area or any of the cities in between? Yeah, general principle. I am familiar. I actually lived in a city called Vinhedo, right? I'm going to write here, Vinhedo. Right? I'm going to also write Valinhos, okay? Because they are neighbor cities, general principle. I used to live in Vinhedo, and Vinhedo is an amazing city, right? Like Vinhedo and Valinhos, they are, top-notch small cities in between São Paulo and Campinas, right? If I would choose myself, general principle, I would pick Vinhedo. That's my top choice. Valinhos would probably come second. They are both amazing cities, okay? They have, very, quality amenities, amazing supermarkets, good restaurants, gyms, the quality of life in those cities, they are pretty high, and they have access. Like if you need a larger city, typically they're closer to Campinas, which is a big city. And if you want an even bigger city, you also have access to São Paulo, because again, they are in between Campinas and São Paulo, all right? Now, about the rail project, General Principal, I've been I hear about that for probably over 20 years, okay? And the idea, right, 20 years ago, it was that like there would be like a bullet train type of rail system. That's from actually, I think, 25 years ago, and it hasn't materialized yet. But I wouldn't be concerned with that, General Principle. Like, this kind of axis, right? Like between, it actually starts with Jundiaí, right? Jundiaí, and then you have, Vinhedo, Valinhos. There is also Indaiatuba, which is more like countryside. But these are all great choices, okay, for living. I particularly, right, like I love it to live in São Paulo up to my, 20-something years. But São Paulo nowadays is just like a massive city. It is too much action for me, to be honest with you, okay? So if I would go back, I would probably pick Valinhos would be Valinhos and Vinhedo, right? Like, I mean, they're at the same level. Actually, just for you guys to know, like Valinhos many times is ranked like as one of the top, and the same thing for Vinhedo, as one of the top 10 cities in the entire country to live in, right? Like really, really good cities. All right, General Principal. I hope that was helpful. Let me see what else. What else we have? Any other participations? Not that I can see. All right, let's take another one from our backlog. Do you help with moving money from the United States to Portugal? If so, how does it work? All right, so typically we help people move money, from the U.S. to Portugal when they are applying for, the visas, D7, Golden Visa, and so on. But typically we just help you get a bank account in Portugal. That's as far as we go. Portugal is not as bureaucratic as Brazil to receive money. So like to Brazil, if you send $50,000, you typically need help to like release the money in Brazil. Not so much Portugal, right? So in Portugal, we actually help more with the NIF, which is the tax ID. We help you acquire the NIF, and then we help you open a bank account in Portugal to receive the funds, which is a necessary step for you to apply for visas nowadays, right? Like, I mean, it's not like in Brazil. Brazil, if you pursue the retirement visa, you don't need to send any money up front. You're basically just showing that you have the income and the potential capability of sending money to Brazil, right? Not Portugal. Portugal, you're not going to get the D7, the passive income visa, unless your money is sitting in a bank account, right? So that's what we do. We get you the NIF, we get you the Portuguese bank account, and then basically say, all right, wire the money. Okay, that's the help we provide, right? But that's pretty enough for your journey. After you are in Portugal, then you can, potentially pursue better routes, to transfer money. But actually, for the beginning of your journey, you don't need to send much money. Typically, Portugal is going to require 12 months worth of money for you to keep yourself, and it could be as low as $1,000 per month. Okay, so we're talking about $12,000. It's not a lot for someone who's migrating to another country, and yes, you can basically, if you have a Chase bank account, once you have the Portuguese bank account, you're just gonna enter the SWIFT, the wire information, and you're gonna wire the funds from your Chase, Bank of America, whatever bank you use in the U.S. to the Portuguese bank account. All right, pretty straightforward. All right, Ahmed, another question. How easy or difficult it is to transport furniture and household items from the U.S. To Brazil? Ahmed, typically more difficult than you would expect, right? As you may realize just by our live streams, Ahmed, things in Brazil are typically more complex than it should, I guess. And for you to send stuff to Brazil once you become a resident, right? This is a heads up. Like you should be a resident before sending stuff to Brazil. But what I see, Ahmed, is that typically is going to be more a personal choice because of sentimental value. Because when you factor in all the costs that you're going to be spending to bring stuff from the United States to Brazil, typically the end result is not enticing by any means. All right. And I did bring personally, there was in 20, I don't recall if it was 2011 or 2012, I brought a container from the United States to Brazil, and it was like, it was an odyssey, right? Like, I mean, we spent a boatload of money. The container got stuck in Santos at the port, and, like, I mean, there was like, there was something going on with the workers at the port, and then we had to pay like an overstay for the container. So every single day we would need to pay, like additional money. And at the end of the day, someone, was asking for additional money to release the container, which we didn't feel comfortable with doing that, right? Like, I mean, it was, at the end of the day, it was more a personal choice than anything else, right? But it's not financially advantageous to bring stuff from anywhere of the world to Brazil. I guarantee at the end of the day, it's going to be a wash at best, okay? Or it's going to be a loss in financial terms. But again, for some clients, like they couldn't care less about the cost, right? We do have clients of this type. And for them, they say, listen, I don't care. Like, I want my piano. Like, I've been playing my piano for 20 years and I'm taking my piano. I have, paints. I have, personal items, collectible items. We say no problem at all. Like, when you are our client, we give you the referrals, right? Like for the, transportation companies. And they typically work with you on all the logistics. In the United States, typically they're going to send a container. Right. Let's say if you have your stuff in a storage like in Orlando, right? Let's assume you have your stuff is in a storage in Orlando. The transportation company, they would send a container, by truck. The truck would take this container and position the container by your storage, and then you would load. Right, the loading is up to you, right? Like there would be a truck driver with the container. You will need to hire helpers to move your stuff from your storage into the container. After the things are loaded, they are going to close the container. They are going to have something like a seal that they're going to put on the door so nobody says that there was something that wasn't there, right? Like they seal the door of the container. The driver goes away, takes your container from Orlando, right, like to the port, like I'm not sure if for Florida. This is just an example, right? To let's say Miami, and then from Miami they naturally ship the container to Brazil. After it arrives in Brazil, it goes through like the customs process, which is very bureaucratic, time-consuming, and costly, right? But after it's released at the port, then the same process is going to occur. They're going to drive your container to your point of destination. And it could be pretty much anywhere. Naturally, all of those costs, they are going to be factored into your planning when you work with the transportation company, right? So bottom line, if you have, stuff that is personal to you and it goes beyond just financial value, yes, that's something you can pursue. If you're taking stuff mostly, because you think you're not going to be, paying the crazy prices that things cost in Brazil, at the end of this journey, typically it's going to be a kind of wash. Yes, assets, they are going to leave the United States. You're going to pay a fraction of what they cost in Brazil. But once you factor in all the time and expenses that you had bringing that stuff to Brazil, you're going to see that it wasn't such a great deal anymore. All right. Okay, just a heads up. If you're here with us, like our live stream. When you like our live stream, you help other people just like you find our content. You help our firm, which is appreciated for sure. And let's take a final question over here. Ahmed, thank you for the time you dedicate to everyone. Information is always very helpful. I appreciate your words, Ahmed. Thank you for the support. Very happy to see you over here. Okay. All right. Last one. Wayne. Even though the federal government is shut down, they're still sending federal retirement annuities, federal survival annuities, and social security payments. And then Matt is confirming, correct. I received my first retirement annuity today. Hey, congrats, Matt. Thank you for sharing, Wayne. That's good to know. All right. Let's hope the shutdown is just for a short period of time, right? Like we are all cheering for the United States. And I want to say thank you, everyone, for participating in today's live stream. Our next live stream is going to be on next Wednesday. So we're talking about October the 8th. And I hope to see you all over here again and wishing you a blessed rest of your Wednesday.